What happens when you betray the one person who trusts you the most? How far will a husband go when his wife's secret night out turns their whole world upside down? The end comes not with shouting, but with a single set of legal papers delivered in public, leaving everyone stunned. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The sound of my heels hitting the hardwood floor echoed through our quiet house like gunshots in a library. I winced, quickly slipping them off and padding barefoot toward the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. The digital clock on the microwave glowed an accusatory 2:47 a.m. David sat at our kitchen table, still fully dressed, his laptop open in front of him. The blue light from the screen cast shadows across his face, making him look like a stranger. His dark hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it for hours. "Working late?" he asked without looking up, his voice eerily calm. I forced a laugh, dropping my purse onto the counter with what I hoped sounded like casual exhaustion. "You know how it is with deadlines. The whole team stayed until we got the Morrison account materials finalized." The Morrison account. David's fingers stopped moving across the keyboard. "On a Friday night? You know how demanding Mr. Levins can be." The lie rolled off my tongue so smoothly it almost convinced me. "We ordered pizza, made it a whole thing. I should have called, but my phone died and... Your phone's been buzzing for the last hour." My stomach dropped. I glanced at my purse, where my very much alive phone had been vibrating with notifications I'd been too afraid to check. "Oh, that's weird. Maybe it just came back to life when I got home. You know how temperamental it gets." David finally looked at me, his brown eyes searching my face with an intensity that made my skin crawl. We'd been married for 8 years, together for 10, and I'd never seen him look at me like that before. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle, and I was the missing piece that didn't quite fit. "Mummy?" We both turned toward the kitchen doorway, where our 6-year-old daughter Lila stood in her unicorn pajamas, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. "Hey, sweetheart." I rushed over to her, grateful for the distraction. "What are you doing up?" I heard voices. "Are you and Daddy fighting?" "Of course not, baby." I knelt down to her level, smoothing her messy blonde curls. "Mummy just got home from work, and Daddy was telling me about his day. We were just talking quietly so we wouldn't wake you up." Lila looked between us with the uncanny perception that only children possess. "Daddy looks sad." I glanced back at David, who was watching us with that same unreadable expression. "Daddy's just tired. We're all tired. How about I tuck you back into bed?" "Can Daddy come too?" The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. David closed his laptop with a soft click and stood up. "Of course, Princess. Let's get you back to sleep." As we walked Lila back to her room, I felt David's presence behind me like a weight. He helped me tuck her in, kissed her forehead, and whispered goodnight, but I could feel the distance between us growing with each passing second. Back in the kitchen, David had already disappeared upstairs. I stood alone among the remnants of our normal life, Lila's art projects, magneted to the refrigerator, David's coffee mug in the sink, the grocery list I'd written in my careful handwriting just that morning. Everything looked the same, but something fundamental had shifted. My phone buzzed again. With trembling fingers, I pulled it from my purse and saw a string of notifications. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. 7 text messages from Mark, the bartender I'd met at the rooftop party. 2 Instagram notifications, and a missed call from Holly, timestamped just 20 minutes ago. I quickly deleted Mark's messages without reading them, my heart racing as I realized David might have heard my phone buzzing earlier. Had he seen the screen light up? Did he know about the calls? As I headed upstairs, I caught a glimpse of David through our bedroom doorway. He was sitting on the edge of our bed, still fully clothed, staring at his hands. For a moment, I almost went to him, almost told him everything, almost begged for forgiveness, Instead, I slipped into our ensuite bathroom and closed the door behind me, leaning against it as I tried to catch my breath. In the mirror, I looked exactly like what I was, a woman who had just spent the evening flirting with a stranger while her husband waited at home with their daughter. But as I stared at my reflection, I felt something else creeping in alongside the guilt, defiance, anger even. Why shouldn't I have a night out? Why shouldn't I feel attractive and wanted? David barely looked at me anymore, buried in his work and his routines. When was the last time he'd made me feel special? I washed my face, changed into my pajamas, and when I finally emerged from the bathroom, David was already lying on his side of the bed with his back to me. I slipped under the covers, leaving a careful space between us. "David," I whispered into the darkness. He didn't respond, but I could tell from his breathing that he wasn't asleep. I lay there for what felt like hours, listening to the silence and wondering what tomorrow would bring. My phone, charging on the nightstand, remained mercifully quiet, but as I finally drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally changed between us, something that couldn't be taken back. The fluorescent lights in our open-plan office felt particularly harsh Monday morning as I settled into my cubicle with my usual large coffee. I'd barely slept over the weekend, David's cold politeness more unsettling than any argument would have been. Well, Colette Vance's voice carried across the office as she approached my desk, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor. "Look who's finally embracing the single life." I looked up from my computer screen, where I'd been pretending to review copy for the Henderson campaign. "What are you talking about?" Colette perched on the edge of my desk, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against my coffee mug. At 28, she had the kind of effortless confidence I envied, the type of woman who could wear a bright red lipstick to work and somehow make it look professional. "Oh, come on, Astra. The whole office saw Holly's Instagram story. You looked like you were having the time of your life at that rooftop party." She leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "So, how was your night to freedom? Did David finally let you off the leash?" Heat crept up my neck. "It wasn't like that. I just went out with friends for a few hours." "Honey, there's nothing wrong with having fun. God knows you deserve it after being tied down for so long." Colette's voice carried just a little too well in the open office space. "I mean, when's the last time you did something just for you?" Around us, I could feel other co-workers glancing over, their conversations pausing as they tuned into our discussion. Jennifer from accounting was pretending to organize files while clearly listening. Tom from marketing had stopped typing altogether. "It really wasn't a big deal," I said, trying to keep my voice low. "Just a girls' night." "That's not what it looked like in the videos." Colette pulled out her phone, swiping through her social media feeds. "Holly posted some great shots of you on the dance floor. You looked so happy, so alive, not like the stressed-out mom we usually see around here." My stomach clenched. "Videos?" "Oh yeah, there were several. You were quite the star of the evening." She showed me her phone screen, where a short video clip showed me laughing and dancing with a group of people I barely knew. In the background, I could see Mark, the bartender, watching me with obvious interest. "I should probably get back to work," I said, reaching for the phone to get a better look, but Colette pulled it away. "Relax. It's not even 9 a.m. yet. Besides, Mr. Levins is in meetings all morning." She tucked her phone back into her purse. "So, tell me about the cute bartender. Holly mentioned you two really hit it off." "There was no bartender," I lied, but even as the words left my mouth, I could feel my cheeks burning. "Astra Quincy, you are a terrible liar." Colette laughed, a sound that seemed to echo through the entire office. "And there's nothing wrong with a little harmless flirtation. You're not dead, you're just married." "Can we please not discuss this here?" I glanced around nervously, noticing that our conversation had attracted even more attention. Sarah from HR was walking past our section, her eyes lingering on our cubicle cluster. Fine, but we're definitely continuing this conversation at lunch." Colette stood up, smoothing down her skirt. I'm just saying, it's nice to see you acting like yourself again instead of David's shadow. As she walked away, I tried to focus on my computer screen, but the words seemed to blur together. I opened my email, hoping for some distraction, but found myself scrolling through social media instead. It didn't take long to find what Colette had been talking about. Holly had posted multiple stories from Friday night, and I appeared in most of them. In one video, I was laughing so hard at something Mark had said that I was practically falling over. In another, I was on the dance floor with my arms raised, looking more carefree than I had in years. The comments were mostly positive, friends from high school and college expressing surprise and delight at seeing fun Astra again. But as I scrolled through the posts, my heart stopped. In the background of one photo, barely visible but definitely there, was David's car. He must have driven by the bar at some point during the evening. Had he been looking for me? Astra? Mr. Levins's voice made me jump. I quickly closed the social media app and looked up to find my boss standing beside my cubicle. At 48, Richard Levins was the kind of man who commanded respect through quiet authority rather than loud demands. His grey suit was perfectly pressed, his expression professionally neutral. Good morning, Mr. Levins. I was just reviewing the Henderson materials. I'm sure you were. His tone was polite but cool. Could I see you in my office for a moment? Just a quick word. The office around us seemed to go completely silent. I could feel every pair of eyes tracking our movement as I followed Mr. Levins across the floor to his corner office. He closed the door behind us and gestured for me to take a seat in one of the chairs facing his desk. Astra, you've been with the company for 4 years now, he began, settling into his own chair. Your work has always been exemplary, professional, reliable. Thank you, sir. Which is why I wanted to speak with you personally about some concerns that have been brought to my attention. He opened a folder on his desk, though he didn't look down at it. It seems there's been some discussion around the office about your extracurricular activities this weekend. My mouth went dry. I'm not sure what you mean. Social media posts featuring company employees can sometimes reflect on the organization as a whole, especially when those posts suggest certain lifestyle choices. His words were careful, measured. I'm not interested in policing anyone's personal life, but I do need to ensure that our workplace remains professional. Of course, absolutely. I could hear the desperation creeping into my voice. My personal life has never interfered with my work performance. I'm sure it hasn't, but perception can be just as important as reality in our business. He leaned back in his chair, studying my face. I trust this conversation will be sufficient to address any concerns moving forward. Yes, sir, definitely. Good. That's all I needed to hear. He opened the folder and began reading, a clear dismissal. Please close the door on your way out. I walked back to my cubicle on unsteady legs, acutely aware of the whispered conversations that stopped as I passed. Colette was nowhere to be seen, probably in the break room spreading more gossip. I sank into my chair and stared at my computer screen, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment I panicked, thinking it might be Mark again, but it was from Holly. Saw the pics from Friday. You looked amazing. David's a lucky man. I quickly deleted the message and put my phone in my desk drawer. But as I tried to focus on work, I couldn't shake the feeling that my carefully constructed world was starting to crumble around me. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure I wanted to stop it. The bass from the club's sound system thrummed through the walls as I stepped onto the smoking patio, the cool night air hitting my flushed face like a slap. It was Saturday night, barely a week since the rooftop party, and Holly had convinced me to join her and her husband Trent for just one drink at their favorite downtown spot. One drink had turned into 4, and now I was standing outside Club Meridian, watching Holly light up a cigarette with the practiced ease of someone who'd never really quit. God, I needed this. Holly exhaled a stream of smoke into the night air. Trent's been such a bore lately. All work and no play, you know. Trent shifted uncomfortably beside her, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. At 36, Holly's husband had always been the quieter half of their relationship, but tonight he seemed particularly withdrawn. Maybe we should head home soon, he suggested, glancing at his watch. It's almost midnight. Midnight? Holly laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the ambient noise of the patio. The night is still young. Besides, Astra's finally learning how to have fun again, aren't you, sweetie? She passed me her cigarette, and I took a drag, even though I hadn't smoked since college. The nicotine hit my bloodstream like a small rebellion, making me feel dizzy and reckless. I don't know what you mean, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I could hear how unconvincing they sounded. Oh, please, you've been glowing all week. And don't think I didn't notice you checking your phone every 5 minutes. Holly grinned, her red lipstick slightly smudged from drinking. Someone's been texting our little Astra, and I'm betting it's not David. A group of 20-somethings had gathered near the patio's edge, their laughter mixing with the distant sound of traffic. One of them, a girl with pink hair and multiple piercings, was holding up her phone, apparently recording her friend's antics. Holly, please keep your voice down, Trent warned, but she waved him off. Why? We're among friends here, no judgment zone. She took another drag and fixed me with her penetrating stare. So spill. Who is he? The alcohol and nicotine had loosened something inside me, and before I could stop myself, I found myself talking. His name is Mark. He's a bartender. We met at that rooftop place last weekend. I knew it. Holly clapped her hands together, nearly dropping her cigarette. Tell me everything. Is he cute? Single? Good kisser? Holly, Trent said again, more firmly this time. What? We're just having girl talk. She turned back to me, her eyes bright with anticipation. Come on, Astra, live a little. Tell us about this Mark. I took another sip of my drink, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. He's different from David, spontaneous, fun. He makes me feel like I'm 25 again. See, that's what I'm talking about. Holly's voice was getting louder, drawing glances from other groups on the patio. You've been buried under domestic bliss for so long, you forgot what it feels like to be desired by someone new. It's not like that, I protested, but even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. Mark had been texting me all week, sending funny memes and asking about my day. Nothing inappropriate, exactly, but definitely more attention than I'd received from David in months. Oh, honey, it's exactly like that. And there's nothing wrong with it. Holly stubbed out her cigarette and immediately lit another one. David's a nice guy, don't get me wrong, but he's about as exciting as watching paint dry. When's the last time he surprised you? When's the last time he made you feel special? I thought about David's quiet presence at the breakfast table that morning, how he'd made Lila's favorite pancakes without being asked, how he'd left my coffee exactly the way I liked it even though we'd barely spoken all week. He's a good father, I said weakly. Being a good father doesn't make him a good husband, Holly shot back. You're 32 years old, Astra. You shouldn't have to settle for good enough. Maybe we should talk about something else, Trent suggested, but Holly was on a roll now. No, this is important. Astra needs to hear this. She turned to face me fully, her expression intense. You know what your problem is? You've convinced yourself that wanting more makes you selfish, but it doesn't. It makes you human. The group of young people near us had gotten louder, their laughter echoing across the patio. The girl with the pink hair was still filming, now pointing her phone in different directions, as her friends posed and made faces. David loves me, I said, but the words felt hollow. I'm sure he does, but love isn't enough if you're not happy. And you haven't been happy for a long time. Holly's voice softened slightly. I've watched you disappear little by little over the years. The Astra I knew in college wouldn't have spent her Friday nights at home organizing closets. I have responsibilities, a daughter. So do I, but you don't see me turning into a domestic robot. Holly gestured broadly with her cigarette. Lila needs a mother who's fulfilled, not one who's slowly dying of boredom. Trent checked his watch again. Holly, maybe we should... Oh, for God's sake, Trent, relax. We're having a conversation. Holly's tone toward her husband was dismissive, almost cruel. Not everything has to be scheduled and sanitized. I felt a stab of recognition at her words. How many times had I spoken to David with that same dismissive tone lately? How many times had I rolled my eyes at his careful planning, his quiet consideration? You know what you need, Holly continued, warming to her theme. You need to stop feeling guilty about wanting things. Stop apologizing for taking up space. Stop letting David's boring-ass routine dictate your entire life. David's not boring, I said, but without much conviction. Honey, the man color-codes his sock drawer. He schedules spontaneous family activities. He probably has a spreadsheet for your sex life. Holly's laughter was infectious, and despite myself, I found myself giggling along. He does love his spreadsheets, I admitted. See? You deserve better than a man who treats romance like a quarterly report. Holly raised her drink in a mock toast. Here's to Mark the bartender, and to Astra finally remembering she's a woman, not just a wife and mother. As she spoke, I noticed the girl with the pink hair had moved closer to our group, her phone still recording. Her friends were gathered around her, all of them laughing and pointing at something on the screen. To new adventures, I found myself saying, raising my own glass. To new adventures, Holly echoed, and we clinked our glasses together. Trent remained silent, his expression troubled as he watched us celebrate. But I was too caught up in the moment to pay attention to his discomfort. For the first time in months, I felt alive, electric with possibility. It wasn't until much later that I would realize the girl with the pink hair had been recording everything, and that our private conversation had been anything but private. By then, it would be too late to take back the words that would eventually find their way to David's ears. But in that moment, surrounded by Holly's validation and the anonymous energy of the club, I felt like I was finally waking up from a long, dreamless sleep, even if I was walking straight into a nightmare. The family restaurant buzzed with the typical weekend dinner crowd as we sat around a table laden with presents and balloons. Lila's 6th birthday celebration should have been a joyous occasion, but the tension radiating from David's parents made the air feel thick and oppressive. Judith Quincy sat ramrod straight in her chair, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the casual family setting. At 62, David's mother had never been what anyone would call warm, but today her disapproval was practically radiating from her pores. Beside her, Jerry tried to maintain his usual peacemaker demeanor, but even he seemed strained. "Open mine next, Lila," I said with forced cheerfulness, sliding a carefully wrapped package across the table. "I think you're going to love it." Lila tore into the wrapping paper with the enthusiasm only a 6-year-old could muster, revealing the art set I'd picked out weeks ago. Her face lit up with genuine delight. "Mom, it's perfect. Look, Daddy, it has watercolors and everything." David smiled at our daughter, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him all day. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You can paint me a picture for my office." "I'll paint one for everyone," Lila announced, already examining each brush and pencil with intense concentration. "That's lovely, dear," Judith said, but her eyes remained fixed on me with laser-like intensity. "Astra, could I speak with you for a moment? Perhaps we could step outside for some fresh air." My stomach dropped. "Oh, I think we should stay with Lila. It's her special day." "It will just take a minute." Judith's tone brooked no argument. She was already standing, her purse clutched in her perfectly manicured hands. David looked between us, his jaw tightening. "Mom, maybe this isn't the time." "It's fine," I said quickly, not wanting to cause a scene in front of Lila. "We'll be right back, sweetheart." The restaurant's small patio was mercifully empty, giving us privacy for what I suspected would be an uncomfortable conversation. Judith wasted no time getting to the point. "I think you know why I wanted to speak with you privately," she began. her voice low but firm. Actually, I don't. I crossed my arms, immediately defensive. Don't insult my intelligence, Astra. Word travels fast in this town, especially when it involves my son's wife making a spectacle of herself at downtown clubs. Heat flooded my cheeks. I don't know what you think you heard, but I heard enough. Judith stepped closer, her eyes flashing with controlled anger. I heard about your new friend Mark. I heard about your little speeches about how boring David is, how you deserve better than your domestic prison. My mouth went dry. Who told you that? Does it matter? What matters is that you're destroying your family with this selfish nonsense. Judith's voice remained steady, but I could see her hands trembling slightly. David is a good man, a faithful husband, a devoted father, and you're throwing it all away for what? Some bartender who doesn't even know your last name. You don't understand, I started, but she cut me off. I understand perfectly. You're having a midlife crisis and you're too selfish to care who gets hurt in the process. Judith's words hit like physical blows. That little girl in there adores you. David has built his entire life around making you happy. And this is how you repay him. I haven't done anything wrong, I protested, but the words sounded weak even to my own ears. Haven't you? Then why does David look like he hasn't slept in weeks? Why is Lila asking me if Mommy and Daddy are going to get divorced? Judith's composure finally cracked, her voice rising slightly. You think no one notices, but we all see what's happening. I felt tears stinging my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Everyone needs to stop being so dramatic. I went out with friends a few times. That's not a crime. No, but betraying your family is. Judith straightened her shoulders, regaining her composure. I'm going to say this once, Astra. End whatever this is with this Mark person. Stop humiliating my son. Start acting like the wife and mother you promised to be. Because if you don't, you'll lose everything that actually matters. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of her words hanging between us like a threat. Finally, Judith turned and walked back toward the restaurant, leaving me alone on the patio with my racing heart and guilty conscience. When I returned to the table, the atmosphere had somehow gotten even worse. David was helping Lila open a present from his parents, a beautiful dollhouse that she immediately fell in love with, but his movements were mechanical, distracted. Everything okay? Jerry asked quietly, though his concerned expression suggested he already knew the answer. Fine, I said, settling back into my chair. Just needed some air. Lila looked up from her dollhouse, her young face creased with worry. Mommy, why does everyone look sad? It's supposed to be a happy day. Everyone's happy, sweetheart, I assured her, reaching over to smooth her hair. We're just tired. Daddy looks really sad, Layla observed with the brutal honesty of childhood. Are you sick, Daddy? David's smile was heartbreaking in its falseness. I'm fine, Princess. Just thinking about work stuff. Boring grown-up things. You think about work too much, Lila said seriously. Mommy says you need to have more fun. The words hung in the air like an accusation. I felt Judith's eyes boring into me from across the table, while Jerry studied his hands with obvious discomfort. Speaking of fun, I said desperately, trying to change the subject, should we order dessert? I think I saw chocolate cake on the menu. But Lila wasn't finished. With the persistence that only children possess, she looked directly at me and asked, Mummy, are you and Daddy going to live in different houses now? The question hit the table like a bomb. Jerry's fork clattered against his plate. Judith drew in a sharp breath. David went completely still, his face draining of color. What? I managed to croak. Jenny at school said when her mommy and daddy stopped talking to each other, they got divorced, and now she has 2 bedrooms. Lila's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. You and Daddy don't talk anymore, and you sleep in the guest room sometimes. I felt the world tilting around me. Sweetheart, Mommy and Daddy are fine. Sometimes grown-ups just need space to think, but that doesn't mean... Are you getting divorced? Lila's voice was small now, frightened. David reached across the table and took her small hand in his. Lila, look at me. No matter what happens between Mommy and me, we will always love you more than anything in the world. That will never, ever change. The careful way he phrased his answer, acknowledging that something might happen between us, sent ice through my veins. This was really happening. My marriage was really falling apart, and it was happening in front of our daughter on her birthday. I want to go home, Lila whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Of course, sweetheart. David was already signaling for the check, his movements efficient and controlled. Let's get your presents and head home. As we gathered Lila's gifts and prepared to leave, I caught Judith's eye one last time. Her expression was no longer angry. It was disappointed, which somehow felt worse. The ride home was silent except for Lila's quiet sniffles from the back seat. David stared straight ahead, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I sat in the passenger seat, feeling like a stranger in my own life, watching my family disintegrate in real time. And the worst part was knowing that I had no one to blame but myself. The garage had become David's sanctuary over the past 2 weeks, and I found myself standing in the doorway, watching him organize files with the same methodical precision he brought to everything else. Cardboard boxes lined the workbench, each one labeled in his neat handwriting. Insurance, bank statements, household records. "What are you doing?" I asked, though part of me already knew. David didn't look up from the manila folder he was examining. Getting organized, making sure everything is properly documented. The word documented sent a chill down my spine. I stepped into the garage, noting how he'd arranged everything with military precision. There was a new filing cabinet I didn't recognize, and his laptop sat open on the workbench displaying what looked like a spreadsheet. "David, we need to talk." I moved closer, trying to see what was on his screen, but he quietly closed the laptop. "I think we've talked enough, Astra." His voice was calm, almost conversational, which somehow made it more frightening than if he'd been yelling. Actions speak louder than words anyway. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but..." "Angry?" David finally looked at me, and I was startled by how composed he appeared. "I'm not angry anymore. Anger requires emotional investment, and I'm past that now." The casual way he dismissed our entire relationship made my chest tight. "So what? You're just giving up. After 8 years of marriage, you're not even going to fight for us." "Fight for us?" David's laugh was hollow. "Astra, there is no us anymore. There's you, doing whatever makes you happy, and there's me, trying to protect our daughter from the fallout." "That's not fair. I made some mistakes, but..." "Mistakes?" David repeated the word like he was tasting something bitter. "Is that what you call spending your evenings texting another man? Is that what you call telling your friends how boring and controlling I am? Is that what you call planning to meet Mark for drinks next weekend?" My blood turned to ice. "How did you..." "It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that you're still lying to me. Even now, standing in our garage, you're still trying to manipulate the situation." David opened a desk drawer and pulled out a key, which he used to lock the drawer again. "I'm done being manipulated, Astra. I'm done being the villain in your story." "You're not the villain. I never said you were the villain." "No? Then what would you call a man who color-codes his sock drawer and treats romance like a quarterly report?" David's voice remained steady, but I could see the hurt flickering in his eyes. "What would you call someone whose wife feels trapped in a domestic prison?" I felt sick. "You heard the recording." Half the town heard the recording. Holly's friend posted it on social media before she realized what she'd captured. David turned back to his files, his movements deliberate and controlled. "The good news is, it's given me clarity about what I need to do next." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm going to handle this properly. Legally, with documentation and evidence, and all those boring, methodical things you find so suffocating about me." David's tone was almost conversational, but there was steel underneath it. "It means I'm going to make sure Lila is protected no matter what happens." The mention of our daughter made my stomach clench. David, please. I know I screwed up, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, Can we? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've already made your choice. David gestured toward my phone, which was buzzing with what was probably another message from Mark. You've chosen excitement over stability. You've chosen validation from strangers over commitment to your family. You've chosen to humiliate me publicly rather than talk to me privately about whatever problems you were having. I never meant for any of this to happen, but it did happen, and it's still happening. David closed the file he'd been reviewing and placed it carefully in one of the boxes. I spent 10 years trying to make you happy, Astra. I worked extra hours so you could stay home with Lila when she was little. I took on projects I hated so we could afford this house, those vacations, Lila's private school. I planned date nights and romantic dinners and surprise weekends away. And apparently, all of that just made me boring and controlling. That's not... It is, though. That's exactly what it is. David's voice remained maddeningly calm. And I'm done apologizing for being the kind of man who keeps his promises. The sound of a car in the driveway interrupted us. Through the garage window, I could see Jerry's sedan pulling up to the curb. David's father got out and walked toward us, his expression grim. "Dad," David called out, "thanks for coming." "Of course." Jerry nodded at me politely but without warmth. "Hello, Astra." "Hi, Jerry." I felt like an intruder in my own garage. I should probably... "Actually, you should stay," David said. "This affects you too." Jerry was already helping David carry one of the boxes toward his car. "Lila's excited about her sleepover with Grandma," he said carefully. "Judith's making her favorite cookies." My heart sank. "Sleepover? It's a school night." "Judith will drive her to school in the morning," David replied without looking at me. "I thought it would be better if she stayed there tonight." "Better for who?" I demanded. But even as I asked, I knew the answer. Better for everyone except me. As I watched David and his father load boxes into the car, I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. This wasn't just about organizing files or having a place for Lila to stay. This was David systematically removing the most important things from our shared life. "David," I said as Jerry drove away with our daughter and what looked like half our important documents. "What happens now?" He stood in the driveway for a long moment, looking at our house like he was seeing it for the first time. Or maybe for the last time. "Now I handle things properly," he said finally, "the way I should have from the beginning." As he walked past me into the house, I heard him add quietly, "You'll understand soon enough." That night I lay alone in our king-sized bed, listening to the silence and wondering what David meant by properly. My phone sat on the nightstand, full of unread messages from Mark, from Holly, from friends who'd seen the viral video of my drunken rant. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't reach for it. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly, and why David's calm certainty was so much more terrifying than any argument would have been. The courthouse lobby was busier than I'd expected for a Tuesday morning, filled with lawyers in expensive suits and anxious-looking people clutching manila envelopes. I'd received David's text at 8 a.m. "Meet me at the courthouse, we need to talk." I'd assumed he wanted to discuss our situation privately, maybe even work out some kind of reconciliation. Despite everything that had happened over the past month, I still believed we could find our way back to each other. We had 8 years of marriage, a daughter, a life together. That had to count for something. I spotted David near the information desk, but he wasn't alone. Judith stood beside him, her posture rigid with disapproval, and Lila was there too, holding her grandmother's hand and looking confused by the formal setting. "David," I called out, hurrying across the marble floor in my heels. "What's going on? Why is Lila here?" Before he could answer, a uniformed court officer approached me, a clipboard in his hands. "Excuse me, ma'am, are you Astra Marie Quincy?" "Yes, but I don't understand." "I have some documents for you." He handed me a thick manila envelope, the kind used for legal papers. You've been served. The words hit me like a physical blow. Around us, the courthouse lobby seemed to go quiet, though I knew that was just my perception. Other people continued their conversations, their business, their normal Tuesday morning routines, while my world collapsed in real time. Served? I looked at David, who was watching me with that same calm expression he'd worn for weeks. David, what is this? Open it, he said simply. My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope and pulled out the papers inside. The first page made everything clear. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Below that, in smaller print, petition for emergency temporary custody. You're divorcing me. The words came out as barely a whisper. Yes. And you're trying to take Lila away from me. I'm trying to protect her. David's voice remained steady, but I could see the pain flickering in his eyes. The temporary custody order is effective immediately. Lila will stay with my parents until the court can conduct a full evaluation. You can't do this. I looked around desperately, as if someone in the courthouse lobby might step in and stop this nightmare from happening. I'm her mother. You're also someone who's been having an affair, drinking heavily, and making impulsive decisions that affect our daughter's stability. David's words were like bullets, each one finding its mark. The court tends to prioritize the child's best interests over parental rights. Lila tugged on Judith's hand, her young face creased with worry. Grandma, why is Mommy crying? It's okay, sweetheart, Judith said softly, kneeling down to Lila's level. Sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult decisions, but you're safe and everyone loves you very much. I want to go home, Lila said, looking between her father and me with growing distress. You will go home, Princess, David assured her. Just not today. Today you're going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa, and we'll figure everything else out later. I stared at the legal documents in my hands, trying to process what I was reading. David had filed for divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences. He was seeking primary custody of Lila, citing my recent pattern of erratic behavior and extramarital involvement. He was asking for temporary spousal support, for me to pay him, since he would be Lila's primary caregiver. How long have you been planning this? I asked. Since the night you came home at 3 a.m. and lied to my face about where you'd been. David's composure finally cracked slightly, showing a glimpse of the hurt he'd been hiding. I gave you opportunities to tell me the truth, Astra. I waited for you to end whatever was happening with Mark. I hoped you'd choose our family over your new friends and your need for excitement. I never slept with him, I said desperately. David, I swear to you, nothing physical happened. It doesn't matter anymore. David looked at me with something that might have been pity. You checked out of our marriage emotionally months ago. The Mark thing was just the symptom, not the disease. Around us, the courthouse lobby continued its normal rhythm. Lawyers consulted with clients, families waited for their cases to be called, court officers directed traffic. But I felt like I was standing in a bubble of surreal devastation, watching my life disintegrate in the most public way possible. Daddy? Lila's voice was small and frightened. Are you and Mummy getting divorced like Jenny's parents? David knelt down beside his daughter, his expression gentle despite the circumstances. Yes, sweetheart, Mommy and I are going to live in different houses for a while, but that doesn't change how much we both love you. Will I still see Mommy? Of course you will. We'll work out a schedule so you can spend time with both of us. David glanced at me, and for a moment I saw the man I'd fallen in love with 10 years ago. Mommy made some choices that hurt our family, but she's still your mother, and she loves you very much. I wanted to protest, to argue that I was being painted as the villain when all I'd done was try to find some happiness for myself. But looking at my daughter's tear-stained face, I realized that my motivations didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that a 6-year-old girl was losing the only family structure she'd ever known because her mother had been selfish and reckless. I'm sorry, I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to David or to Lila or to myself. I know you are. David said, standing up and taking Lila's hand. "But sorry doesn't undo the damage." As they walked away, my husband and daughter, now legally separated from me by court order, I stood alone in the courthouse lobby, holding the papers that had just redefined my entire existence. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a wild moment, I thought it might be David, telling me this was all a mistake, that we could still work things out. Instead, it was Mark. "Hey, beautiful, still on for drinks tonight?" I stared at the message, remembering how exciting those texts had seemed just a few weeks ago. How validated I'd felt, how alive and desired and free. Now they just looked like evidence of my own stupidity. I deleted the message without responding and walked out of the courthouse into the bright morning sunlight, legally divorced from the man I'd spent 8 years with, temporarily separated from the daughter I'd carried and raised and loved more than my own life. The revenge wasn't brutal in the way I'd expected. There was no shouting, no public humiliation, no dramatic confrontation. Instead, it was perfectly legal, methodically planned, and absolutely devastating. David had used my own choices against me, documented my own words and actions, and presented them to a court of law with the same careful precision he brought to everything else in his life. The man I'd called boring had just outmaneuvered me completely, and as I stood on the courthouse steps, holding divorce papers and temporary custody orders, I realized that David's quiet, methodical approach to life wasn't a weakness. It was exactly what had allowed him to protect our daughter and himself from the chaos I'd brought into our lives. The most brutal revenge of all was that it was entirely justified.